started. Welcome everyone for joining us live for our webinar. Today's webinar is Top Food Safety Non-Conformances Learnings and How to Prevent Reoccurrence. My name is Denise Webster. I head up the training and consulting departments under the SCS Consulting Services umbrella. Many years in food manufacturing as well as CPG and retail. And I'm looking forward to really diving into this topic with Hilda. Hilda, if you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hilda Bryan, and I'm the Senior Auditing Manager with Food Safety Audits. I have several years experience in fresh fruits and vegetables on farms and facilities, as well as auditing farms and facilities. And I look forward to discussing the top non-conformances we've been finding. Just to give you a little bit of information about SCS Global Services, we are an international leader in third-party food safety, environmental, and sustainability certification. And as you can see on your screen, we've had over 30,000 certifications in over 100 countries. We work with more than 15,000 clients and have celebrated recently our 40th year. And to support our clients, we have auditors in every major market.
Thank you, Hilda. And just further on that, we are a global organization, both under SCS Global Services, as well as expanding our SCS Global or consulting services as well. And for those of you that are interested, we do have 4 key pillars of where we focus on things like food safety, sustainability. All right, so our key areas of focus for today's webinar will be to take a look at 2024 in the rearview mirror and understand how we did as a food industry and maybe where we faltered a little bit. Hilda will then take us through a breakdown of the top food safety non-conformances found across different GFSI schemes, specifically Global GAAP, Primus GFS, SQF, and BRC. We'll then both examine the importance of conducting root causes, reasons for those non-conformances that tend to reoccur, and then hopefully provide you some practical solutions and best practices to prevent these issues to ultimately strengthen your food safety management systems and audits. So we'll start with just that state of the industry. Comparing 2024 to 2023 specifically with our recall events, FDA and USDA combined, it's about 300 recalls. You can actually, if you're not aware, you can pull the recall information easily from FDA's data dashboard. They do have a new compliance section, and recalls is its own dashboard, and you can run charts and you can even download that information onto an Excel file. Why would this be helpful? Well, it's good to know the deeper details than just these numbers to be able to see how it might impact your particular category of products as well. When we look at the FDA's overall recalls, we do see an 8% increase year over year, whereas oddly enough, USDA's went down 38%. We've heard, right, a lot about a couple of these big recalls that occurred under USDA, but it didn't have such an impact that many sites were affected, even though if you look at the total pounds of meat and poultry recalled, the data indicates that those total pounds under USDA have gone up, even though their total quantity of individualized recalls did go down. When we further look at the numbers and the statistics, more people in the US got sick from contaminated food supply, showing that through an increase in hospitalizations or deaths. And it has been noted that 98% of those illnesses reported were associated with about 13 outbreaks. So we obviously are not seeing that impact that we need to make with whether it's our developing of our food safety management systems or how we do our risk assessments and proactive analysis. So that's why we wanted to make sure we dove into this topic today. When it comes to those trending issues, we can see that Listeria monocytogenes has taken the front seat here with products affected, such as those ready-to-eat meat products, frozen waffles, ready-to-eat meals, and the normal repeat offender produce. When we look at the ready-to-eat meat product recalls, the two leading factors have been related to cross-contamination. One due to ventilation of raw versus ready to eat, and the other one indication shows that it was a cleanliness breakdown of some meat slicers possibly. Both issues, these are not unknown to the industry or regulatory. We can even look as far back as Vilmar Foods in 1998, who had a similar issue with ventilation, different root cause. They were constructing their site, expanding, and Listeria got in through the unclosed off ventilation area into the ready-to-eat facility. So, have we learned from the past? These are the things that we need to do better with in terms of focusing on having adequate design, cleaning, and sanitation of our equipment and facility, including vigilant environmental testing, which sometimes is lacking if we're only doing the regulatory minimum in that area, or maybe not proactively swabbing our environment. We can then see things like Listeria can take up harborage and can definitely result in some significant issues like we've seen in this past year. Some media, though, has pointed to inadequate preventive measures and lack of accountability. That's kind of what's been said out there with these rise in recalls, but it's not a one-size-fits-all problem, nor is it a one-size-fits-all solution. So we hope to kind of dig a little bit more, at least in our webinar today on this. With those overall recalls, Listeria, although outpaced this past year, allergen issues still resulted or contributed to roughly 30% of the total FDA and USDA recalls. So here we also still have a lot of room for improvement in this area, which we'll again dive deeper into this topic. When we looked at the trending issues, it was actually, we saw a reduction in sesame recalls this year versus last year, or 2023, I should say, when it was required to start to label sesame. Also, comfortingly, we have seen a reduction in peanuts allergen recalls. So those two areas, we have obviously, put some vigilance to. And with anything, when you're focused on, some key areas, some other areas tend to end up rising to the surface, as you can see in the most common allergens missed area. It's still the three big bucket offenders: mislabeled product, right? Not getting the right product in the right package; undeclared allergens, that the package, the right product's going in the right package, but that package isn't right in the first place, whether it be due to a formulation change that got missed of a raw material, or some processing aid or something of that nature that was passed through allergen that wasn't declared on the pack. And then a smaller amount, but still very important, is that risk of cross-contact issue with, unlike allergens, being processed on the same line, and not putting the right preventive controls in place for allergen and sanitation mitigation strategies. I did want to add this for those of you that may have missed our January webinar on regulation updates. You can find that on our website. I did pull this in to just remind everyone that we do now have a new final guidance document on food allergen labeling, and coconut is no longer an allergen of concern. They've also updated and dropped a few tree nuts there that are not usually consumed. And we also need to understand how that impacts our programs for audit preparation. We need to show the auditors that we've communicated this regulatory update and any others to senior management. we need to make sure that we've reviewed our HACCP and food safety plan and see if we have anything that might be impacted. If we do have coconut in our on our labels, we have to also put a plan in place for labeling update and reconciliation. Specifically with this guidance document, please read it. And you'll see that it notes that you are, as a food business operator, you are not allowed to list an allergen in the contain statement that is not an allergen of concern by the FDA. So that inadvertently means we need to, in a reasonable period of time, start removing coconut from our contain statement. And then any other related program that you might have that is impacted. So environmental monitoring and more. We've spent decades focused on biological hazards and allergens, and for good reason, right? We just saw in those prior slides. But when it comes to true chemical hazards in food, such as mycotoxins, heavy metals, and environmental contaminants, it's been more than just but a little blip in our risk assessments and controls. FDA and industry is waking up to the long-term effects of chemicals in our food supply chain, including those found in packaging. As you all have heard, FDA has recently banned red number 3. They've launched parts per million limits on lead in foods targeted to babies and children. And now, just recently, they have launched a list of what they're calling select chemicals that will be under FDA review in the supply chain. Some chemicals on that list, and there's a link here, or you can just go to the FDA website, are some that are naturally occurring and some of those that are formulated in foods. PFAS is kind of one of those that can occur in both categories. We also can't forget about the lesson we learned in late 2023 and early 2024 on the food fraud related issue when it came to the cinnamon lead in cinnamon that went into the applesauce pouches. Ultimately, with the creation of the Office of Human Foods, they did create an Office of Chemical Safety, but with the recent administrative changes and layoffs, with Jim Jones leaving his post as of this Monday, the industry priorities, are not hopefully not shifting in this area, but this does allow us to take an opportunity to remind ourselves that it's not the regulation that drives what we do in the industry. It's how we stay focused on our facilities, our products, and ultimately protecting our consumers, growing our brands, and all happily working in the 3 big buckets of food safety, nutrition, and sustainability. So we'd like to hear from you guys. So let's just take a minute before we dive into the GFSI audit component. Sorry, let me open the poll here. Shama, sorry, oh, maybe I'll be able to do it here. No, it's not allowing me to, okay, there we go. Thank you, Shama, you'll have to do that for me. What non-conformance issues are the most commonly found? Okay, so we've given you the 3. And then Hilda, we'll pass it to Hilda in just a minute here to give us what the answer is. What do you think the most common non-conformance issues that are found? Let's see, just a few more people getting their votes in. All right, if we can go ahead and close that poll and launch the results. Okay, so it looks like 48% are saying documentation record issues, followed up by 29% facility design and hygiene, and then neck and neck food safety, HACCP, audit systems, and internal audits. Hilda, what is the results?
The answer is documentation and record issues, followed by facility design and hygiene are the top non-conformance issues commonly found. Okay. I'm going to start by going over some global food safety updates for 2025 and then discuss the top NCs and the different programs listed on the slide. So there are benchmark requirements for all schemes to comply by September 2025 for GFSI. And there's an alignment with Codex and ISO 22003 occurring. SQF edition 10 is coming out this year. And there is a new BRCGS I7 packaging material. All right, I'm sorry. And Global Gap IFA version 6 was obligatory starting January 1st of this year. And just a few notes on that. Their version 6 was a big update for Global Gap. There's now IFA version 6 Smart, IFA version 6 GFS for fruits and vegetables, and IFA version 6 Smart for hops. Only IFA version 6 GFS is GFSI benchmarked. And while version 6 is now obligatory, there still might be return visits using version 5.4-1-GFS, which was the previous version. And for Primus GFS, version 4 is expected to be benchmarked this year as well. So lots of new versions coming out with the different schemes. I now want to start talking about the top non-conformances identified during SCS audits. We're going to start with the Global Gap IFA standard. The chart you see on the screen, since it was for the data is from 2024, it is on the previous version. So the PNC is version 6, while in parentheses is the previous version's control point number. And for those not familiar with Global Gap IFA for fruits and vegetables is predominantly a farm audit with some handling involved in the audit if the producer does any handling. And the top 2 non-conformances found last year on the previous version were considered recommendations, which means they weren't required for certification. But now with version 6, they are a minor, which is why I kept them on this chart, because to be certified, you need to have at least 95% compliance in minors. So these 2 are compliance criteria that previously producers were often not in compliance with, that they may need to be in compliance with moving forward. And that is really, and these PNC 23.02 and 23.03 are related to having an energy efficiency plan that considers minimizing the use of non-renewable energy. And I just want to highlight a couple other NCs that were commonly found. Section 19 of IFA version 6, there were several NCs commonly found, and those had to deal with hygiene procedures being in place, as well as hygiene training occurring, and containers for production and harvesting being cleaned and maintained appropriate for use, as well as having hand washing facilities available. So many of the top NCs found in the Global Gap IFA audits are related to hygiene, training, and hand washing, all of which are important aspects of food safety. For Global Gap PHA, the Global Gap PHA audit is the produce handling assurance, and that is a facility level audit that Global Gap has for fruits and vegetables in a pre-processing state. And the #1 NC found was that PHA 10.1.1, and it relates to if the facility is located, designed, constructed, and maintained in a manner that prevents contamination of produce throughout staging to handling, storage, and cooling. And typically NCs found there are related to sanitation and equipment maintenance. And additionally, the PHA 5.2 is and 5.1 were the next two common NCs found, and that is related to completing mass balance, which is a requirement for the Global Gap scheme. And PHA 8.3 was another common NC where the trace back and trace forward exercise weren't being performed at least every 6 months. And the last one, PHA 13.5, is again related to whether equipment was clean and in working order. Next, we're going to talk about Primus GFS. So I broke this out into this separate modules, and we're going to start with the module 1, which is the food safety management system. And this module also had, if we looked at the modules in total, module 1 is the part of the Primus GFS audit that has the most NCs occur. And if you are familiar with Primus GFS, this is also a very document heavy module. So the #1 NC identified was 1.06.04, which is related to supplier approval documentation being available, demonstrating that suppliers meet the supplier approval program. And then the next common NC is 1.07.03, which is related to testing traceability procedures, trace back, trace forward exercise. And the 1.04.05 is concerned with having calibration and verification records in place. And 1.01.03 is the food safety committee meeting and are records available that is occurring. And 1.02.05 is related to our records that impact food safety being signed off by a qualified person. For this slide, we have the 3 modules related to gaps. So module 2 is the farm module, module 3 is the indoor ag module, and module 4 is the harvest crew. I'm just going to go over the top NCs found for each of these modules. So for farms, it was 210.06, which is related to if products are being exported, is there evidence of the MRLs, the maximum residue limits of the intended markets being met? So is there residue testing occurring? For module 3, 3.07.02, is there a documented training program with training logs for the sanitation worker in place? Because that was a common NC for module 3. And then for module 4, which is the harvest crew, the most common was 4.02.01, which is there documented evidence of internal audits performed detailing findings and corrective actions? In module 5, that covers GMPs for the different types of facilities that may be undergoing a Primus GFS audit. And the top non-conformance identified was 5.09.06, which are the floor surfaces in good condition with no standing water or debris trapping cracks, and are they easy to clean? This is easily the number one issue found in facilities related to floor maintenance. And then the next couple of top NCs, 5.09.12 and 5.09.08, is related to our interior walls and ceilings free of cracks and crevices, and our doors and windows closed to prevent pest entry. And then for Primus GFS HACCP, the number one NC identified was related to, is there documented evidence that the HACCP team members have been trained on HACCP principles? I want to move now to SQF. This chart shows, again, at the top 10 NCs, and overwhelmingly the top NC identified in SQF audits was the 2.1.2.1, which is the SQF system shall be reviewed by senior site management at least annually, including specific topics. The remainder of the NCs are related to our equipment. Is equipment cleaned and maintained? Our external windows, doors, etc., protected against pests? Are the personnel engaged in food handling, ensuring that products are being maintained? Is senior site management demonstrating their commitment through a policy statement? Are the walls, partition ceilings, and doors constructed properly? And our ventilation equipment and devices in product storage handling. So with SQF, the majority of the top 10 NCs are related to facility maintenance, design, and sanitation. With BRCGS, we are still determining the number of NCs that we saw at SCS with BRCGS clients. However, BRCGS did put out a compliance report for top NCs found in 2023 to 2024, and those are Clause 1.1.10, which is related to the recertification audits occurring on or before the audit due date. So are you keeping this scheme, are you continually having your audit dates as you're supposed to? And the remainder, as you can see, are some of the same things discussed with Primus GFS, SQF, and Global Gap. Is equipment clean and hygienic condition? Are chemicals being stored and handled properly? Are the internal and external doors maintained in good condition? Are the walls maintained as required? So just to go over overall trends in NCs across the different programs, Global Gap, Primus GFS, SQF, and BRCGS. Traceability and mock recalls NCs were consistently in the top for each program. Global Gap, I believe I listed the top 10 NCs. The 11th NC found is related to not completing a mock recall. So each scheme that comes up, the next bucket that we're seeing in season is scheme specific requirements. So for example, Global Gap requires mass balance checks. Primus GFS, SQF, BRC, they require management review with specific topics covered, and NCs are being issued because senior management review isn't happening or all the topics aren't being covered. And then across the schemes, facility maintenance and sanitation. There are numerous NCs related to equipment, buildings, and grounds, like maintaining clean equipment, ensuring that walls and doors are in good condition to prevent pest entry. And then record keeping and documentation. Consistently seeing these NCs that require certain records and procedures showing up. For example, calibration records not available, training records not available, supplier approval documentation not available. So these are the recurring NCs that we see throughout the different schemes.
And Hilda, if I can just comment on that, what's interesting is you're highlighting, I'm a food manufacturing kind of person, so I don't spend a lot of time out in the fields, but to think about the global gap in Primus and we're trending issues with traceability, recalls, and mass balance, at the same time, FDA is tasking us with being able to do that traceability and compliance with 204. And being able to conduct effective, efficient, timely recalls related to, potential outbreaks and critical tracking events. So this doesn't just impact, our audits. This directly impacts our regulatory compliance too. And yeah, right. It's just like this is an area we clearly need to focus on in 2025.
Yes.
And then you spoke about MRLs, pesticides, especially for the extended markets. We're bringing in a lot of, produce and goods from other countries. And obviously with our chemical assessment, this is an area that, I've personally with clients have experienced issues in this past year. And then I think even though we're not all audited against all 4 of those schemes, we just in one of those buckets, I think we can learn from the other issues, such as some shared things that you're talking about. Just focus on GMPs, improving training, that communication to senior management when we need resources and we need improvement and empowerment of our workforce. Yeah, it's definitely enlightening. So thank you for sharing that. And then I'll pass it over to you for this next slide.
Okay, so I want to discuss the importance of root cause analysis. Root cause analysis allows us to identify the underlying issues that are causing non-conformances to occur and can be used to inform the corrective actions that we take and preventative actions we take to hopefully prevent them from recurring. Root cause analysis is often required for non-conformance audit findings and internal deviations, and must be provided as evidence that corrective actions have taken place and the root issues have been identified so that they won't reoccur. And a root cause analysis needs to be submitted in accordance with audit requirements and accepted by the auditor. So the auditor may come back and ask for additional information if the documentation demonstrates the root cause wasn't addressed.
Hilda, can you explain a little bit more to our audience in terms of the importance of the reason why that root cause analysis needs to be done and the corrective and preventive actions, really done well and not just kind of pushed through to get the auditor to sign off on them?
Yeah, so maybe the best way for me to do that is to give an example.
Yeah,
So often as an auditor, I will see something happen during an audit involving an employee. Maybe they didn't, maybe they put their hairnet on or maybe they washed their hands and then put the hairnet on, or they left a jacket in a production area or something like that. So that's a non-conformance, and often I see people when they submit corrective actions note that the root cause was the employee being lazy or not listening or something like that. And unfortunately, that's not the root cause, because if a worker was lazy, you probably wouldn't employ them. And typically the root cause is they weren't properly trained on the order of putting on PPE, or they felt like they couldn't leave their station to go put the clothing in the locker room. So perhaps in that case, the root cause is training and food safety culture. So and if you list your root cause as something like the employee is lazy, then you're not getting at the core issue that will prevent this nonconformance from showing up again. So if they're putting the hairnet on, they're washing their hands and then putting the hairnet on, that's a training issue. So it's not just going to be that employee that's doing it. There's probably many employees that are not putting PPE on in the correct order. So
yeah, it could be frequency of training, right? If they're just getting it one time, and like you said, food safety culture, being able to reinforce it, images, pictures, I mean, so many different things other than just, yeah, employee error or employee doesn't want to follow the rules. That's a great example. Thank you, Hilda, for sharing that with us.
yes.
So just to further reinforce what Hilda is saying, the importance of root cause analysis, it's a process. It's not just a task we're trying to achieve. Ultimately, those outbreaks, recalls, GFSI, non-conformances that we just covered are preventable if we focus on understanding that true root cause of these issues and put proactive plans in place that really help support more foundational element success. Ultimately you can see it is a series of interconnected steps and actions that need to be taken to achieve the goal of resolving that so it doesn't repeat again in the future. We're not just putting a band-aid fix on it. It's not just one person or one isolated piece of equipment that broke down. It's, well, even with the equipment, right? Is it our preventive maintenance? Is it the age of that equipment? Are we investing in new equipment? Do we have all the parts? There's so many things that we can do. And we prior did run a root cause analysis webinar that you can take a look at, and there's a lot of resources out there to learn how to do these more effectively. So just speaking to where improvements can further fall, which is identifying our corrective and preventive actions and making sure we truly do have effective root causes. I think, Hilda, you spoke to already a little bit about kind of what some of those corrective and preventive actions can be. What kind of positive findings or things that you've seen that are either best practices or maybe things to avoid when writing corrective and preventive action responses to back to our audit non-conformance reports?
So it's important to know the difference between a correction and a corrective action. So the correction, like often, let's say, for example, premise GFS requires thermometers in every cooler, and I noticed that there's a thermometer not in a cooler. Well, the correction would be putting a thermometer in the cooler, but the corrective action involves, why wasn't the thermometer there in the first place? How can you ensure the thermometer remains in the cooler, etc. So.
Yeah, so they have to fix it, right? They have to fix it for the future and not just put that thermometer in there and go, okay, see, we're good. We've resolved it. Well, what was that root cause? Exactly. All right, so if you would like to take us through this one.
So we're going to go over an example of documentation review and what's commonly found with documents that can result in a non-conformance. So one of the common NCs I unfortunately have to issue, and I really don't like issuing it, is that there's no proof a document was reviewed annually. It's often the document is reviewed, but people don't write the date that they reviewed it, or they don't print the new copy. It's sitting on someone's computer or something like that. So that's an easy one to correct, so that doesn't show up. Another is that records are incomplete and missing key information, like someone's signature verifying that they reviewed the record. It's very important. Or maybe even the date that the record occurred, or something like that. Inaccurate information, such as the wrong date, data, or the requirement. Oftentimes I've seen record templates where the information required wasn't correct, that someone didn't check the template and people were using it and putting information that wasn't needed. Inconsistent, so procedure not matching the process. We do read the SOPs, and we do, we observe what's occurring, and we will determine if this is matching. Disorganized, so for audits that are scheduled, they're coming, and even, for your unannounced, you should still be organized, but especially when they're scheduled and you don't have documentation prepared, auditors will often say, I've waited, 5 minutes, I'm not waiting any longer, and issue an NC because the documentation wasn't organized and prepared. And then document and or record control issues. So following your SOP template, making sure people are signing off like they're supposed to, that obsolete documents aren't floating around, things like that.
Yeah, and this is important, right? Because this is one of the #1 non-conformances. And I liked how you said it's an easy thing to fix, all right? So why are we giving auditors easy things to find non-conformances on, right?
Yes.
We want them to dig deeper to find issues. And these are kind of bullet points that we can use to say, are we effective, team? Where of these items can we control? Because these are all controllable for sure. And then further on traceability, if you can kind of take us through what you're seeing here more specifically.
Yeah, so with traceability, we want to ensure that an operation is able to trace back and trace forward products and find 100% of the product. And the traceability and mass balance exercises that are required, we want to be able to see that you can do that efficiently and effectively, so that it doesn't take a day to find where everything went, because when a recall happens, you want to be able to move quickly. Some things I've seen with NCs related to traceability include not finding 100% of the product. Some mock recalls show that only 95% of the product was found, and maybe that other 5% was waste, but the operation isn't sure. Well, it's important that you can identify 100% of the product, and that you don't forget about the waste, about samples, about seconds that are going to processors, maybe if you're a produce packing house or something, and any other outputs that occur. So sometimes people grab samples to take to a trade show and they forget to log where it went, and then maybe that lot is the one selected for a mock recall and you can't find where that product went. And then another important aspect of traceability is you not only want to be able to recall the finished product, but you also want to be able to recall the ingredients and the packaging, so that if an ingredient needs to be recalled, you're not you want to be able to limit your recall. And then packaging is something to speak to Denise's point earlier about chemicals. Now considering chemicals more, packaging needs to be food grade. Maybe there's a packaging that used non-food grade material needs to be recalled. So it's important that you also are able to recall your packaging materials as well. And conducting a mock recall and a trace back, trace forward exercise ensures that in a scenario where there's no stakes, meaning like you're not getting calls that someone is sick or in the hospital from a food that maybe was supplied by you. So you're taking a scenario with low to no stakes and able to run through your traceability procedure and your mock recall and determine if there's going to be success and resolve any failures that do happen, such as, okay, I only found 95% of the products. Let's do another, let's find out why I can only find 95% and get to the root cause of that. So that, if you ever do have to actually conduct a recall, you've already sorted out these potential issues. Again, to speak to root causes, so we're just going to cover a few of the potential ones that could come up. So poor development or implementation. There could be minimal cross-functional team engagement. Sometimes departments silo themselves, production, maintenance, food safety, and it's important that each team is working together and communicating, and addressing any challenges or barriers that are present with communication. And then another potential root cause is ineffective understanding of requirements. So many of these schemes, or all of them, have implementation interpretation guides or longer, clarifying statements about compliance criteria that help operations understand the scheme that they are choosing to audit against. So it's really important that that the operation has a good understanding of the requirements, and lack of planning and time to prepare for the audit. When I was a food safety manager, it's always important to be audit ready every day in case something happened, and that helps avoid lack of planning or not being prepared. And that when you're analyzing a problem, it's really important that you aren't focusing just on what you're seeing in front of you, but what's happening underneath the issue, what other factors are contributing to the issue, so that you can get to the root cause.
Excellent. Thank you, Hilda, for taking us through all those non-conformances and examples. I think it'll really help the industry better prepare this year. Let's go ahead, though, and hear from you guys. If we can go ahead and launch that poll. What area do you hope to most improve in 2025? We've given you 5 areas based on our learnings. So let's go ahead and give you guys a few seconds here to get your answers in. I see one that is definitely trending here. Give you just a couple more seconds to everyone to get their answers in. All right, let's go ahead and close that poll here and share the results. Okay. Well, I'm pleasantly surprised to see 45% of us do want to focus on employee training and culture. I mean, we talked about root causes, right? If we look at even, some of those non-conformances, that focusing on that versus a specific, SQF 11.1.2, it's a broader foundational area. I think that is directionally the right way. 26% policies and procedures. Absolutely. If we don't have the right policy procedure in place, then no matter how much training and good culture we have, it's not going to be done in the manner that heads us in the right direction. And then 16% validation verification, that deeper dive, right? Maybe we feel we do have the basics right, but we need to make sure that we go in and solidify that, yes, we're doing the things right in the first place, and those increased verification activities like internal auditing, which we'll talk about here too in the coming slides, and then yes, 9% rolled out those GMP practices, which are like a daily thing. We always, I think all of us would probably pick that as well. Okay, thank you for sharing that. Go ahead and close that. So just to round out our webinar, and we will have just a few minutes for questions. Just wanted to give you some strategies for improvement. We've got some 3 big bucket areas, which actually mirrors exactly what you guys just spoke about, which is identifying risk and severity, right? Understanding those prior non-conformances. That's why I wanted to give you guys some insights today. Making sure those risks are product and process specific, right? We can't just look at the risk of ready-to-eat meat or a specific risk, in a baked good. It's about what is the process, what is the product, what's its intended use, and then overall the effectiveness of how we've implemented our mitigation strategies against those risks. Second, training. We've given you some very specific things that you could focus on here. That investment in your team and in training and becoming certified. There's a ROI in that for sure. And then understanding that difference between validation verification, not in a just food safety plan, but also what it means when we do our vulnerability assessments. Are we validating our prerequisites even to make sure they're right in the first place? And then what is our frequency of verification? So with that power of risk assessment, I've just listed, I'm not going to name them all off, all the different requirements in those GFSI schemes that require risk assessments. Ultimately, it is not a one-size-fits-all approach, and you have to look at having different ways, different teams even. My food safety risk assessment team is likely going to be different than my food defense team, where I need to maybe pull in IT or HR, or if we have security. Those kind of parameters of how we assess risk and form teams around doing this needs to be elevated and thought about further to make sure that we're not just trying to fit one thing in one area. And then just a deeper dive in validation and verification. Here are all those areas where you want to make sure you're checking off when you're looking at your food safety management systems. We know the common ones, but have we thought about our validation verification of our own training program? Is it the same PowerPoint slide that we've been delivering? Are we doing any kind of coaching, mentoring programs? Are we doing one-point lessons? Are we really digging into our documentation record reviews like Hilda mentioned? More internal audits, more frequency verification, assessments, tests, and challenges. This can help us be better prepared as a team and make sure that our programs are truly doing what we said we're doing as well. I did want to just make sure that everyone knew there is a new Preventive Control 2.0 out, which is FDA's and FSPCA's combined acknowledgement and recognition that we needed to add more in-depth hazard analysis and align more with codex. This is now a couple more contact hours, but I'd highly encourage you to consider this as for those of you on this webinar that are PCQI, it's probably time to do a refresher anyways. And now this is their current thinking, and there's additionally some new hazard guidance documents and new learnings, and we've moved on, you know, beyond our implementation and the older version of 2018. So something to consider. So we wanted to just take a few discussion points to some thoughts. I know we're kind of running behind, but I think these are value add. You know, ultimately, how do you see in audit scores, Hilda, that we have not, you know, we have not seen that those NCs are just GMPs, but there always seems to be a management commitment side related to those final outcomes. Is that what you're seeing when, you know, the facility is in poor repair or hygiene, that also senior management commitment non-conformances tend to go along with those?
Yes, I would agree with that. That either in the, and you can see that either in the senior management review or the resources available, or who is showing up to the audits.
Yeah, even who's showing up, that's indicative of that commitment. Yeah, great one. And, you know, and of course, if senior management is not actively, if we're not communicating what we need and our initiatives, or they don't understand the importance of certain programs, then that can lead to not getting the right resources, not putting the right initiatives, projects, or strategic goals in place, and making sure that we're not just blaming management, but are we as technical leaders communicating effectively? You know, I've had recent experience where, you know, senior leader didn't know about a key concern, and ultimately was upset because they're like, well, if I would have known, I would have provided the resources associated with that. So we have to make sure that we're communicating effectively. The other key area of just industry discussion that's being had right now, and I know SQF is having this at the upcoming conference, is why do we expect high scores on audits? You know, I think audit, you know, ultimately Hilda's mentioned that it's a snapshot, and it helps with continuous improvement. And we ultimately need to have that continuous improvement mindset. We need that power of planning and preparation, like we talked about in that root cause issues, and that ultimately we need to strive to adjust, refine, acknowledge, and recognize that the audit is there to create a cycle of growth. And that score is only an outcome measurement. And if we expect high scores, we need to be putting in the work, because really, what is at stake if we focus on the score and not truly those outcomes? So for those of you that did put in some questions, I know we'll have just a minute or so. Let me see here. And like I said, any questions we don't get to today, because we had a lot of content to get through, we will respond along with the webinar deck. So just a quick few questions in terms of how often is training the corrective action? You know, are we really getting at truly the root cause? Hilda, I know you mentioned in your example, you know, it's not just the employee getting training, but it's the effectiveness of the training. What would that look like if you were wanting to see a good root cause or corrective action?
Oh, that's a big question.
I know, right?
Yeah, so sometimes, okay, a recent premise GFS NC I issued was related to chemical storage, and chemicals not being stored in the correct place, and you know, ideally, a root cause would look at, like, not simply are employees being trained to store them in the correct location, but do they even have access? Do they have a key to access the storage? is there enough space for them? Is that why they're not putting the chemicals in the right place, because the storage closet is full? So yes, maybe they simply just, were putting chemicals in a convenient location, but there's, there's underlying factors that should be examined.
Yeah, we need to ask those 5 whys, right? Need to
Yep.
use those root cause analysis tools, not just guess at it or quickly like get that root cause in just to get the auditor something to review. Makes sense. Another question is, what would be the best way to address or correct errors found during the review of completed records? I've had this issue, right, where we all, have an error, and maybe, we don't necessarily, find it in our verification, but maybe we do. Is there any common in the auditing world best practices or things that how should they go about correcting errors to show the auditor that yes, we acknowledge that error existed and this is how we fixed it? Any thoughts there?
Including it in, oh, sorry, including the corrective action may include updating the procedure, training on the procedure, providing some completed records showing that maybe the record template was updated, or that the record is now being filled out correctly.
Excellent. Yeah, so it's not just one, what I'm hearing, it's not just one corrective action, it's and preventive action is likely multiple steps that you're going to do. Update the SOP, create a improved training, retrain, maybe even write up a whole CAPA on ourselves, right? If we see a trending of issues and then address it. So it's not a one thing to resolve it. Okay, excellent. Well, again, we'll respond to those other questions that you guys have in the chat field. So know that we will get to it, and you will get the recording as well tomorrow. And we'll make sure to process the deck. Once we close the webinar, there will be a post-webinar survey. So we'd love to hear from you guys. Our 2025 training calendar is up to date. We offer all trainings in English and Spanish. If you need certification audit support, we have it and consulting. And overall, thank you guys for joining us today. Appreciate your time. Thanks, Hilda.
Thank you.